All right, before we get into that, I picked up this book here, The Case for Catholicism by Trent Horn. He's been mentioning it a lot. He actually wrote this in 2017, so about 5 years ago. But he references it a lot, and it might be something I might want to read aloud on stream, because he's going to talk about authority. So he'll be talking about here's a second, let me update this. All right, he's going to be talking about authority, so he'll be talking about sola scriptura, sacred tradition, the Old and New Testament canons, of course. He's going to be talking about the papacy, the priesthood, the Eucharist, and the Mass. Right, as speaking about what is the church, how we are saved. So he's going to talk about baptism, justification, and looks like he touches upon the question of eternal security. And what is the body of Christ? So he's going to talk about purgatory, the intercession and veneration of the saints, the Blessed Virgin Mary, Mother of God, the Immaculate Conception, and bodily Assumption. So this ought to be a very interesting read. It's subtitled Answers to Classic and Contemporary Protestant Objections. So we could have some really interesting conversations based on this reading. So I'll, read aloud and comment on it, but not tonight. But I have this in queue here. I think it's going to be a very good one indeed. And anyways, a historic week with the Constitution being held up. Yes. Yeah, because basically the progressives back in the 70s as basically, found a mysterious line in the Constitution where it speaks of privacy. And so therefore we can kill people. We can actually intend to kill a person. And we're not talking about capital punishment or anything like that. We're talking about intending death to a human being in embryonic form. All right. I mean, every living thing passes through an embryonic form. Well, at least we do, anyways, and that's my point in general, is that we are no less human at any stage of our development. So that's important. But no, there is no right to abortion in the U.S. Constitution. And but one thing I wanted to do is play this video I saw. See, yeah, I'll adjust that later. Let's see here. There it is. And will it pop up? There we go.
Illegitimate! Illegitimate! Illegitimate!
Isn't that interesting? People who are sitting U.S. senators are claiming that a decision that came down from one of the three branches of government is illegitimate. Now, don't you find that to be as dangerous as the language that the left poses against people on the right for saying that the last election we had was illegitimate, or the fact that 4 years during the Trump presidency, Hillary Clinton and those were talking about how Russian interference caused it to be illegitimate and so on and so forth. It is quite dangerous, all right, to begin to either claim that an official governmental action is illegitimate, because it is exactly what it is supposed to be. Yes, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, as she has said, called. Yeah. The point is, I think it's just harmful, you know. Like even people on the right who were wanting to challenge the election results, you can do that. There's an actual legal process to challenge these things, and everything was done to try to accomplish that. But that doesn't address the effects that it might have on people. I think the point is that if we're going to have a government at all, we need to be able to trust its outcomes. So if the president signs an executive order, that is an executive order. Maybe it could be challenged, right? And be taken up to the Supreme Court. So that you got your checks and balances, right? Or when something passes in the Senate, the vote's counted. It's a legitimate form of government. It's established. It's laid out in the Constitution. Exactly what constitutes our government, what constitutes the three branches, and what constitutes the relationship they have with each other. And we have to be careful to get these three branches out of whack. So if the executive branch is doing 2,000 plus executive orders to try to push things that won't go through the House and the Senate to the president's desk to be signed or vetoed, that I think is incredible, an over exercise of the executive branch, and also when it comes to a topic like abortion, where there is no constitutional right. This is not stated anywhere, and if especially when it's kind of being tucked into like some sort of right to privacy, but really it's people have a right to life. The problem is they're not willing to think of them as U.S. citizens because they haven't been born yet. Except for the fact that if you kill a pregnant woman, you're actually charged with 2 murders. So there's precedence for that. But again, legal laws, basically sit upon, divine and natural law. So human beings have a right to exist once they exist. The problem is people are always talking about rights, but they're never talking about responsibilities. As soon as that human life is formed, guess what? You now have a responsibility for another human life. People on the left don't tend to look at it that way. They want their contraception. They want their abortion. They want to have all the sex they want without any consequences, which is the natural end for why we procreate. Pleasure is a concomitant. It's something that stands along with, it accompanies the reproductive act, but it is nevertheless essentially a reproductive act, and it needs to be treated as such. It needs to be kept within its context, and it's caused all kinds of problems in our society. You get arguments from people like, how can I bring a child into this world, a mother working 2 jobs, She lets herself get knocked up again. There's nobody around. Yeah, exactly. Well, why is bacteria life on Mars, but, an actual child in the womb, isn't on planet Earth? Or yeah, if you damage eagle, a bald eagle eggs, you could be fined, but it is a fantastic day, isn't it? I I called. I didn't call this specifically. I was actually doubtful that this would occur. Like, remember during the Kavanaugh hearings, people were chanting outside. Everybody was told that if Kavanaugh gets on there, he's gonna be part of the overturning of Roe versus Wade. And I thought, wow, that's an incredible speech there. I thought it was just rhetoric to get people riled up, but obviously they weren't wrong. Kavanaugh was one of the many justices that took this position, which it makes perfect sense, right? Because once again, there is no constitutional right to kill a child. There's no moral right to kill a child, no matter what the case may be. But yeah, to think of a mother working two jobs, already has a child. How could you bring another child into poverty? That's like one argument. Like, what, you've never heard of like food stamps, Medicaid? Families supposed to help each other. There are free food giveaways. There's all kinds of things you can do, right, to take care of a family. Heck, if you just learn how to be frugal, right? Heck, sew your own clothing. There's all kinds of things people can do, right? So, hey, let's not bring a child into poverty, like whatever that means. We're the richest nation in the world. So you're gonna kill a child because of that? It's a bad argument, right? But icing on the cake for those who care. It has been banned in Japan. Oh, it hasn't? And Clarence Thomas has paved the way for the same to happen in America. Well, obviously you would know my position on that. Marriage is between, according to Catholic theology, obviously, the sacrament of marriage is between one man and one woman. That's, what is this called? Obergefell case? I forget how it's pronounced. I don't do a lot of reading these days, but I continue to see things getting redefined. I continue to see things shifting in a progressive way, which really is just a watering down of or eroding, an erosion of morals and standards and norms that we've had in this country for a long time. So, but yeah, I think that the rhetoric of that this is a illegitimate decision is problematic. It's problematic when people on the extreme far right who believe that Donald Trump won the last election. He had his days in court. He couldn't. He did what he could. And all of that stuff. It's challenging to see people wanting to weaken people's faith in legitimate government, right? We have legitimate government. And so, yeah, this is incredibly dangerous rhetoric, and it's what radicalizes people. And there are people who are mentally unstable. You start saying stuff like remember when Bernie Sanders was saying that Republicans were killing people, because they wouldn't sign on to a universal health care, what ended up happening? Some crazy guy goes and shoots up the place at a ballpark. You know, you have to be very careful with your rhetoric. I don't know when it was, but remember that guy who set himself on fire? He committed suicide. He burned himself to death because climate change, right? It didn't change my view on that. The climate, does shift and ebb and flow and all this other stuff. What are you gonna do about it? We adapt. We always do. I like clean stuff. Let's do clean stuff, but let's not get too far off. Why is my nose itch? But yeah, so I knew good things were going to come this year. I knew that at the very beginning that this was going to be a red wave this year, right? It was going to be a red wave. We were going to see that people were going to be sick and tired of the things that are being pushed by people on the left of the aisle. And the Democrats are going to get what's coming to them in November. We're going to see that. So, but anyways, yeah. Let's continue with the video here.
The Supreme Court has overturned Roe versus Wade, that landmark decision that gave women a right to an abortion that no longer stands in the United States.
Yes, correct. But notice the rhetoric that is being used. It was a decision of the Supreme Court that gave a right to women in America. Do you hear how she's saying this? Believe me, I don't want to, but I want to comment on it. The judicial branch is not to be legislating from the bench, all right? They're not supposed to be creating rights, so to speak. Right? That's what amendments to the Constitution is. And that's why things like getting rid of the filibuster really concerns me. If the Republicans were saying that, I would say no, that's not good. Even if the Democrats are gonna simply just obstruct because they don't want anything to get through, because they don't want the Republicans to get credit for anything because they have control of the House. That's how they're thinking about it. But I'm also hoping that when the shift occurs and the Republicans have the House and the Senate, that they can at the very least try to get some things through that are going to be helpful to people. And at least, if this is the way I see it, if you can't get 10 people from the other side of the aisle, then you've got too much packed into it. It's it caters a bit too much to one side or the other. If you actually want to get something passed, you actually have to. Sometimes I don't like the idea of compromise, but there's bills, spending bills, all kinds of stuff. I don't want the filibuster gone. It needs to stay there. I don't want the Supreme Court to be increased in seats. It's been how it is for many, many years. I think it's good that we keep that. And the only reason why progressives want to put more people on the seat, to more seats on the Supreme Court, so that they can try to shift how the court functions. But politicizing the court is a problem. It's not about trying to push progressive ideas. You can't legislate from the bench. By nature, the Supreme Court is preservative. in what it does. It interprets law, hopefully with a originalist jurisprudence, the documents and what they meant when they were written, what the original intent was. It is by nature conservative, right? So they don't like the Supreme Court, so they have to politicize it. They have to try to expand it to get people who are just going to legislate from the bench, to try to push forward things. Roe versus Wade was an example. It was a bad ruling. It's been a really bad ruling for a long time. There's a greater precedence for abortion being illegal in the United States. And it wasn't until the 70s that the Roe versus Wade actually shifted what was precedent, how things typically ran according to our history and our traditions. And again, precedent can be overturned, especially if it was a bad ruling. And so that's the kind of conversation that has to be had, right? Hey, welcome in Eldred and Savage and Trudeau. Welcome, everyone. People are going nuts online over this today. Yeah, basically all that this overturning Roe versus Wade just pushes it to the states. That's it. It just pushes it to the states, which I think that the states certainly ought to. I never liked the Common Core. I don't think the federal government should be involved in educational standards. I think that that should be handled state by state. There's a lot of things that could be handled on a state by state. I'm not saying that we should have a minimalist federal government where all they do is trade, immigration, foreign affairs, minting money, building a military, basic stuff, right? I don't think it should be like a bare bones kind of minimalist federal government. But at the same time, it certainly shouldn't be massive and making decisions that certainly states are very well capable of dealing with on their own, right? So I think it's important to have that principle of subsidiarity when it comes to allowing the states to do what the states are perfectly capable of doing. Yeah. I don't like all of the governmental agencies, the bureaucracy, and all of that stuff. Just massive government. It's really not necessary, and but I think we have FDR and others to thank for that kind of push in terms of how the government works. But yes, so Maxine Waters, here we go.
The hell with the Supreme Court. We will defy them. Women will be in control of their bodies. And if they think black women are intimidated or afraid, they got another thought coming.
Okay, so, well, first of all, this has nothing to do with black women specifically. She made it racial. If anybody makes it racial, it's Planned Parenthood that have set up shop in predominantly black communities. And not to mention that their founder was a eugenicist and an incredible racist. But yeah, people need to talk about that. But yeah, this doesn't have to be racialized. It's really weird. You have men, you have women. All right, we're good with that. Did you hear what she said? We're going to defy a legitimate branch of government. Building upon this, guess what my governor and the Attorney General has stated in our own state? that they are not going to enforce present law. They won't do it. They won't prosecute. Because with this becoming effective, my state has older laws that actually had abortion illegal. So they're refusing to exercise, to enforce present law within my state. Have clearly stated this. I'm like, I'm really, really hoping that they get sued up and down for their lack of prosecution. You know, and I kind of get the idea if I were a police officer and I didn't like a certain law I had to enforce, you know, maybe I could go and do something else. I could be a security officer or, you know, go into a different profession. The same thing would happen if you're in the military and you were asked to go on a mission that you didn't think was justified. You know, you know, you would have to go and you'd have to do something else. But governors, the attorney general, you know, they have to be law-abiding citizens, and they have to fulfill their roles in government to enact what it is that are on the books. That is their job. That's what their responsibility is. So I know for a fact that my governor is probably going to be kicked out, and hopefully we never see my governor again. My governor has done an incredibly horrible job with stuff. That much for certain. But you can't defy it. It's a legitimate branch of government. If this had gone the other way, it's, you know, you win some, lose some.
We're going to be in these streets all day and all night, and we need to turn these tears into anger, turn them into fury. We need millions of people out in the streets. Shut this country down.
Shut this country down. So they want to force, right? See, this is problematic. Over time, laws will change. And I'm perfectly fine with peaceful protests. There's absolutely nothing wrong with peaceful protests. If people want their voices to be heard, that's part of a right in the United States, that we can peacefully assemble, we can protest, hold rallies, those sorts of things. When you start obstructing the flow of other people's lives and speak in terms of, we're going to shut this country down, that's a problem. That's incredibly intrusive. If you're going to start using violence and you're going to start using force and pressure and those sorts of things, that's not good. That is not good for our country. It's not helpful either. It doesn't change anything. It absolutely doesn't change anything at all. Especially in our country, because we are a nation of laws. That's how it's going to function. That's not going to change. You need a vote. You need to run for office. You need to encourage other people who run for office. That's just how it works. Shut this country down? No, that's not going to work.
And tell them that we won't go back, and we are not going to go back to business as usual until the U.S. government ratifies abortion into our laws.
So I'm
well, I mean, fair enough if you can get it through the Senate. You know, how do you amend a constitution, right? Yeah, it's basically communist tactics. It's leftism 101. People think that they're justified in acting violently. As I had pointed out before, that to the left, their violence they call speech. The speech from the right, they call violence. These people are insane. All right, you can't reason with that kind of rhetoric, and the way they're framing that. It's just dangerous. You can't do that. You need to reason out your position and see what stands in the end as the most reasonable ideas. But because it's not very logical, it's not very rational, they can't win on that level. They just can't. That's why they have to try to manipulate it. Okay? That's why they don't like the Supreme Court. That's why they want to turn it into a legislative branch. They want to legislate from the bench. That's why they want to do a lot of executive orders in the executive branch, because they're not playing the game correctly. All right. It's unfortunate. Yeah, I mean, at this point, we're just sitting and watching, right? But yeah, I mean, to amend the U.S. Constitution, we're looking at, 2/3? I think it requires 2/3, and that's not going to happen. I just think it's funny when sometimes the left, the Democrats float ideas. And what perhaps bothers me the most with all of these sorts of things is that, and we'll probably end up talking about it a little bit later, but how like Pelosi and Biden, that they keep saying they're Catholics, but thankfully Pelosi was confronted by her bishop and banned from receiving the Eucharist within his diocese, because people will float the word Catholic all they want. I'm sorry, it's just not what it is, and their constant rhetoric about we'll get into that.
Angry right now. If you aren't angry, you are part of the problem.
And not only, what's the problem? You haven't stated that. And not only am I not angry, I am incredibly overjoyed, because there is no right to abortion in the Constitution. If there was, I would acknowledge that. But rather, we have a right to life.
From time to time, I quote this poem by Ehud Manor. He says, "I have no other country, even though my land is burning. Only a word in Hebrew penetrates my veins, my soul, with an aching body and with a hungry heart. Here is my home. I will not be silent, for my country has changed her face." My country has changed her face.
Oh, I think she has changed her face. What I first heard when I was looking at this is that she paused, almost as if she was trying to remember how to pronounce the author's name. Now, I don't want to assume that's what took place, right? But I do want, it makes sense to me that she paused. That sometimes she likes to read it. I'm pretty sure that she has people working for her that said, "Hey, quote this, this will be great." Like, nothing's changed. In fact, the change took place when the bad Supreme Court ruling of overturning our history and tradition to put Roe versus to what's the language on that? Their ruling, what was it, 1973 on Roe versus Wade?
I will aid and defend abortion. I will aid and defend abortion. I will aid and defend abortion.
These people want to kill babies. They want to aid and abet abortions. They want to kill babies. And at some point, there just isn't any reasoning with that kind of thing. it just isn't. I mean, I get if a person's an atheist and they don't value themselves very much, they don't think of much of themselves, or in one instance they're saying that they are nothing and they are meaningless, but then they assert their will and try to create a meaning for them that is only relevant to themselves, and that is for them their God. It's just sad to see what people do to themselves, to see it. Like I was talking about yesterday, we have inherent dignity, but when you drag your human dignity through the mud and become utterly depraved, and your reason becomes darkened, and your intellect is just not directed towards its proper end, and your conscience isn't properly formed, you've taken what is a very beautiful thing, which is the human person, and you have sunk lower and are living in an undignified manner. You've accepted ideas that are so abhorrent and dangerous that they're just dragging themselves through the mud, and it's just really sad to see.
All we want is our right to choose. If you want to have a child, go ahead and have a child. If you want to leave your child at the doorstep, go ahead and leave your child at the doorstep. But for us, we can't live with that.
You hear that? We can't live with that, right? We can't live with... Now, you can't live with that. Well, apparently all the children you're slaughtering, definitely aren't living with that. They can't live. They can't breathe. They just can't breathe.
Okay, sir, I'm just trying to help. No need to raise your voice. So you ordered a pound of chicken salad, and when you took it home, it was only 0.987.
Yeah, 0.987. Yeah, that's a serious concern.
It wasn't a full pound, so you'd like some money back. I would love to help you with that.
What the Supreme Court just did was that they chose to endanger the lives of all women.
All right, so this is this I don't find explained well enough from conservatives, and those who do aren't. I don't know. I don't think enough people really recognize that one of the issues that is being brought up is the potential, not just potential health risks, but the actual endangerment to a woman's life that can occur with like ectopic pregnancies and other things. And how often do you hear that couched within the Catholic teaching of double effect, right? In that you must at all times preserve the principle that you cannot intentionally, purposefully kill a child. You can't do that. A child may end up not surviving a surgery that the mother has for herself, and it's unfortunate. Maybe we do not yet have sufficient medical care to be able to do everything we can to, keep the child alive and intend to keep the child alive while trying to address and keeping the mother alive. And it's not our fault that we don't have, medical science that can be perfect with all of that. But at no point can you intend to kill the child. All right? The child may end up dying or not surviving all attempts to save both, right? If the child is removed too prematurely and we do what we can to keep the child alive, all of that is altogether different. You can address a woman's health, right? But the way that she will portray it, and the way people on the left will portray it, is that the only way to save the mother is to directly intend to kill the child. We're going to kill the child and just focus on our intent to save the mother. And you can't do that morally. The principle of double effect is that the child is going to be negatively influenced in this. It may actually end up resulting in death, trying to save the life of the mother. But it's not an intention to kill the child. In fact, you do everything scientifically possible to try to save the child as well. If the child ends up dying in this, that's the double effect. That's the unintended consequence, which altogether changes the moral. What's the word I want to use? The moral. The word is escaping me. When you're responsible, morally responsible. I'll just say that because the other term is culpability, moral culpability. You know, it kind of reminds me, you have a woman, culpability was the term that I was thinking. You can have a woman and a child in arms, okay, running from a bear in the woods. Horrible scenario. The bear is very fast, drooling, very hungry, and has already had a taste for human flesh before, and it's really coming at the mother and the child. If the mother says, in order to save my life, I'm going to take my child, I'm going to throw it into the mouth of the bear and run. Because if I don't, the bear is going to get both of us. And we're both going to die. Okay, I think this is an ample analogy for this, right? So you have the woman who intentionally throws the child into the mouth of the bear. All right, she now becomes morally culpable for intending the death of the child in an attempt as a means to an end to preserve one's own life. That's, in my mind, one of the most anti-mother thing that a mother could actually do, right, is to become morally culpable where blood is now on your hands, because now you're morally culpable for what you have intended, you know. But if you both die, it is by no fault of your own. You've done everything you can to save yourself. You do everything that you can to save the child. You know, I mean, why not try to, I don't know, it's kind of weird. You're going to hide the child somewhere. I don't know. The point is even if both die, at least they do so heroically. The mother protecting the child and giving her life. Maybe covering over, you know, maybe hiding. I don't know. The point of the matter is that when you throw the baby into the mouth of the bear, you are now morally culpable for that action, right? You are now intending the death of your child. Maybe there's a glimmer of hope that the bear will leave the baby alone, but the thing is you're using the baby's death as a means to your own survival, which even that isn't even certain. But you can see the moral dilemma there, or the moral problem rather. And so, yeah, I think it's necessary that when we hear that rhetoric being used, remember the principle of double effect and not getting blood on your own hands.
And all birthing people in this country. But not only that.
Yes.
They've chosen to strip rights from men, too.
You deserve the full pound. You deserve the full pound.
Wait a minute, what? Stripping rights from men? Are they talking about the man consenting? Oh, that's another interesting question. Okay, so let's say a mother. Well, in that particular scenario, unfortunately, both the mother and the child dies. That's the way that this particular scenario is set up. So if the mother throws the child into the mouth of the bear, and let's say, for instance, she does survive, even though that's not the dilemma I'm setting up. I think that society, all right, ought to incentivize virtue, which would be to incentivize the heroic actions of motherhood, and should de-incentivize or discourage people from vice. Okay, so incentivize virtue and discourage vice. And so, in this sense, culture is a little bit downstream of politics in that politics can have an impact and shape culture moving forward. So, on a moral level, right, there's the moral culpability there. So let's say that the woman does survive. Yeah, she would need to go to confession. Definitely would need to go to confession. Absolutely. She has greatly wounded her soul. She's going to have this blood on her hands. It's definitely going to wound her soul. Absolutely, it's going to wound her soul. Laws on the books. What kind of laws can we have in the books? Okay, infinite. No, absolutely not infinite. Just you keep doing that, so I'm going to ban you. I'm going to make it very, very clear. All you do when you come in here is make anti-Catholic statements. That's it. That's all you do. You don't even dialogue about it, nor do you really say anything substantive, because confession is to God in the confessional. All right, it's not confessing your sins to a man instead of God. That's not what Catholic theology is. So every time you come in here, you just say dumb stuff. All right, so you're gone. All right, so as far as like what kind of law can you have on the books for a woman who purposely kills their child? Well, that's murder. So I think certainly there would be a murder sentence. I do think that ought to be the case. Yeah.
It's just like, if you're paying for the full pound, you should deserve the full pound, because I believe that people should be able to like get what they want and what they need and what's like safest for them.
Look, I am spitting mad over this. We have 6 extremist justices who have decided.
Extremist justices who were just exercising an originalist jurisprudence. This rhetoric is incredibly dangerous. Absolutely dangerous. To speak in terms of justices who are supposed to be politically neutral. And I get, see, this has been the problem for progressives for a very long time, that the judicial branch is not for legislating. It's not. It's about interpreting established law. That's it. You can't reinterpret it and create something out of it. You know, that's not how that works, right? You can't say, well, oh, what was it? I think it was discrimination. I'm trying to remember who it was. If it was Thomas or it was he was trying to reason that somebody can't be discriminated against for one reason or another. It wasn't in the document. But the point of the matter is, the Constitution's not a living document. If if something is to be repealed, a new amendment, you have to go through the amendment process. There's a process to do that. If you don't have the votes, you don't have the votes. That's just how it is. That's what makes this country where it cannot be driven simply by the majority, especially of one particular party pushing everything they want to push. I mean, for the most part, conservatives just want to conserve. They just want to keep the culture where it's at. They want to get back to our roots as a Judeo-Christian tradition, and have that morality. I mean, especially with all of these arguments that people are making about, well, what happens if a condom breaks? Well, first of all, you shouldn't be using contraception. Or you end up with 6 babies because of in vitro fertilization. Well, first of all, you shouldn't be doing that, Or you're a teenager and you have to decide whether you're going to be a teenage mother or just a teenager. And, well, first of all, you shouldn't be having sex outside of marriage. You shouldn't be fornicating. The thing is that the very morals that if they were lived out, you wouldn't have the so-called unexpected pregnancies. Every single one of my children I knew to be possible. You know why? Because I engaged in the reproductive act. The reproductive act may result in a child. The woman has to have ovulated, and even then you have like a window of opportunity. So it's a small window at that biologically. We're not rabbits, people. What was my point? Oh yeah, so just having the firm resolve in our culture. Oh, and then there's STDs, right? If you weren't going around sleeping around with a whole bunch of people, you're supposed to have one person. Now, of course, obviously, if I got married and my wife had died in our 30s, I would be free to marry again. And I would either A, get married and have a child with that person, or I wouldn't get married. But even then, that's kind of interesting. Particularly because a marriage is not even a marriage. See, in Catholic theology, it's not a marriage. Even between a man and a woman who even sign a legal document saying they're married, even if they went up to the altar before a priest and said their vows, it is said that the marriage has not yet been consummated until they engage in a marital act that is open to life, that leads towards the procreation of children. Otherwise, it's said merely to be ratified. Only. It's not even said to be yet consummated. Right? So there's a distinction in canon law in Catholic theology for that. That's just how serious the Catholic Church is about its definition of marriage, engaging in an act that goes to children. That's why you can't redefine marriage. You can't redefine it, otherwise you just gut it of everything. You would just gut it from... See, and I bet most people watching this probably didn't even know that about the sacrament of marriage in the Roman Catholic Church. I bet you didn't even know that. It just goes to show just how much has been gutted from it in the minds of people in our culture. Right? Oh, of course, Savage, you know that because you like to hang around, right?
That their moral and religious views should be imposed on the rest of America.
Moral and religious views being posed on the rest. So basically what they're saying is that the justices, you remember with the Amy Coney Barrett, the dogma, right, lives loudly within her, right? And of course, she has a Catholic background, but that's just going to mean that she's probably, well, hopefully she's more conservative. But it has to do with her jurisprudence. It's not, and like I said, the Supreme Court by nature is conservative. It is to conserve the original meaning of laws and of the Constitution, right? It's to preserve our understanding of what it meant when it was written. It is by nature conservative. That's why they want to expand the court. They want to put people on there who think that that they should legislate from the bench. And like, no, could you imagine if the right was doing that? Which they don't have to, because they already like the Constitution. Right. They're not imposing anything. It was never a right in the Constitution to begin with. It wasn't. It was like 2 or 3 steps removed, trying to argue from privacy.
5 justices said they respect precedents. 5 said that Roe v. Wade was established precedents. 5 said they would never undermine established precedent.
Now, I don't know exactly what she's speaking to, but I do know that, yes, when it comes to precedent has been overturned before, and there's reasons why a precedent would be overruled. And that is, show me in the Constitution where it talks about a right to an abortion. Now, morally speaking, people do not have a right to kill people. Like for example, people argue, well, don't I have a right to do what I want with my own body? Number one, no, you don't. You don't have a right to just go and kill yourself. You don't have a right to depravity. You don't have a right to evil. You don't have a right to do things just because you will them. You have a right to do what is right. You have a right to virtue. You have a right to truth. You have a right to beauty. You have a right to goodness. This is what we have a right to do. Right? And even then, we're not just talking about your body. We're talking about the body of another person. So if a Supreme Court justice nominee was talking about how, yeah, we're going to uphold precedent, it's always going to be in a qualified sense, because precedents do need to be overturned if they're not good.
It is unconscionable what this decision will do to the American people.
I have no rights to my body now? Are you kidding me right now? This is what everybody that has ever put that uniform on and went over and put their lives on the line to be told now I can't have the choice over my body.
So she's saying that people put on a uniform, went overseas, fought wars, so that she could kill her children. You have a right to look fabulous.
Body?
The court has done what it has never done before. Expressly take away a constitutional right.
It's not a constitutional right.
That is so fundamental.
Killing of children? I would say that birthing children is fundamental to the survival of a society, not to mention the human race.
So extreme that women could be punished for protecting their health.
Protecting their health? No. See, there's that line again. There's the principle of double effect. You can address your health concerns while at the exact same time not intending to kill the life of your child. Right? There's the principle of double effect.
So extreme that women and girls were forced to bear their rapist's child.
So a person was raped, ergo, we can kill the child now. Right? I get the emotional trauma, I get the stress, I get the cross that these people have been asked to carry. I totally get the cross that they have to carry. It's going to the pain of the rape caused suffering, psychological pain, emotional trauma, and it's an incredible weight to carry, an incredible weight. And I would just invite people to act virtuously and heroically and not kill the child who did absolutely nothing wrong, who is an innocent. Carry that cross heroically. Allow the suffering that one has created and allow it to shape and mold you towards greater and greater virtue. And in this sense, heroic virtue. Right. Yes. The problem is that liberty is not freedom to do whatever you want. I keep emphasizing this. Liberty is to do what you ought. Right? So the government shouldn't infringe upon your ability to do what you ought to do. Because of that liberty licentiousness distinction. We have because as soon as you give into vice, you are no longer free. Whoever sins is a slave to sin. They are a slave to that vice. It has weakened their liberty. It actually does the complete opposite. It's like the heroin addict saying that they're completely free to shoot up heroin, but all the while they're completely addicted to it, driven by obsessions and compulsions, even to the point of overdosing and maybe even killing themselves. But that's freedom, so they say. Oh, it's not. That's slavery. That is slavery.
It just stuns me.
What? It stuns you? What what stuns me is that you say of yourself that you are a Catholic. All right. Ouch. Okay. We gotta get rid of that. Gotta get rid of that. All right. So, what is of interest next is I saw some quotations in the first draft in the Dobbs versus Jackson's Women's Health. Justice Alito delivered the opinion of the court, and there were a few things I saw. So at the time of Roe, 30 states still prohibited abortion at all stages. In the years prior to that decision, about a third of the states had liberalized their laws, but Roe abruptly ended that political process. It imposed the same highly restrictive regime on the entire nation, and it effectively struck down the abortion laws of every single state. So, yeah. As Justice Byron White aptly put it in his dissent, the decision represented the exercise of raw judicial power, and it sparked a national controversy that has embittered our political culture for half a century. That's a very interesting way of putting it, raw judicial power. All right, to take away from the states their own political processes that were already in place, and whether for or against, and basically wiping all of that out to impose upon the states something that was basically being legislated from the bench, a bad Supreme Court ruling. We hold that Roe and Casey must be overruled. The Constitution makes no reference to abortion, and no such right is implicitly protected by any constitutional provision, including the one in which the defenders of Roe and Casey now chiefly rely, which is the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. That provision has held to guarantee some rights that are not mentioned in the Constitution, but any such right must be deeply rooted in the nation's history and tradition, and implicit in the concept of ordered liberty. I love the way he talks. Roe's abuse of judicial authority, right? So this is... So Roe was egregiously wrong from the start. Its reasoning was exceptionally weak, and the decision has had damaging consequences. And far from bringing about a national settlement of the abortion issue, Roe and Casey have inflamed debate and deepened division. Well, this is most certainly true. How many people do you think has sat down and read all of this? It is time to heed the Constitution and return the issue of abortion to the people's elected representatives. The permissibility of abortion and the limitations upon it are to be resolved, like most important questions in our democracy, by citizens. Sorry, I have to adjust that. There we go. I played that video earlier and the sound difference. The sound difference. Yeah. There you go. We'll have to keep it at that right there. So Roe was egregiously wrong from the start. Its reasoning was exceptionally weak, and the decision has had damaging consequences. And far from being bringing about a national settlement of the abortion issue, Roe and Casey have inflamed debate and deepened division. It is time to heed the Constitution and return the issue of abortion to the people's elected representatives. The permissibility of abortion and the limitations upon it are to be resolved, like most important questions in our democracy, by citizens trying to persuade one another and then voting. See, we're supposed to persuade each other. Open dialogue, free exchange of ideas. We're supposed to try to persuade one another, not by pressure, violence, intimidation, but by speech. Free speech, so that we can freely share with each other and try to persuade one another of differing ideas. And then we would all vote, and that's how our democracy basically is, functions. So this is how conservatives think. Yeah. Let's see. Any other highlights in here? Hey, Don, welcome in. Let's see. There certainly is a lot here. It's quite long. It's quite lengthy. And it's probably better for me to just if I didn't read anything else. Those few things. The inescapable conclusion is that a right to abortion is not deeply rooted in the nation's history and traditions. On the contrary, an unbroken tradition of prohibiting abortion on pain of criminal punishment persisted from the earliest days of the common law until 1973. It's true. Ordered liberty. I like this language of ordered liberty. I like that term, ordered liberty. Right? It's not just that we have the liberty to do what we ought to do, but it's ordered in society as a whole. So ordered liberty sets limits and defines the boundary between competing interests. Roe and Casey each struck a particular balance between the interests of a woman who wants an abortion and the interests of what they termed potential life. But the people of the various states may evaluate those interests differently. In some states, voters may believe that the abortion right should be even more extensive than the right that Roe and Casey recognize. Voters in other states may wish to impose tight restrictions based on their belief that abortion destroys an unborn human being. Our nation's historical understanding of ordered liberty does not prevent the people's elected representatives from deciding how abortion should be regulated. Hello, cat. We have long recognized, however, that I think it's pronounced stare decisis is not an inexorable command. And it is at its weakest when we interpret the Constitution. It has been said that it is sometimes more important that an issue be settled than that it be settled right. That's definitely problematic right there. Things should be settled right. But when it comes to the interpretation of the Constitution, the greater charter of our liberties, which was meant to endure through a long lapse of ages, we place a high value on having the matter settled right. Indeed. On many other occasions, this court has overruled important constitutional decisions. We include a partial list in the footnotes that follows. Without these decisions, American constitutional law as we know it would be unrecognizable, and this would be a different country. Yeah, very, very much true. Ordered liberty, you think about an example past that people shouldn't be able to blast their music without repercussion. Yeah, like I don't have a right to wake up my neighbors with my blaring music at 3 a.m. or to drive down the streets at 4 a.m. with your massive bass speakers in your trunk. It's that sound. Right, it's ordered liberty. That's not a thing one ought to do. We shouldn't be going around waking people up from sleep. People have work in the morning. Roe was on a collision course with the Constitution from the day it was decided, and Casey perpetuated its errors, and the errors do not concern some arcane corner of the law of little importance to the American people, rather wielding nothing but raw judicial power. The court usurped the power to address a question of profound moral and social importance that the Constitution unequivocally leaves for the people. Casey described itself as calling both sides of the national controversy to resolve their debate, but in doing so, Casey necessarily declared a winning side. Those on the losing side, those who sought to advance the state's interest in fetal life, could no longer seek to persuade their elected representatives to adopt policies consistent with their views. Does that make sense? And this is true on both sides. Let's say you wanted something even more extreme than what was allowed by Roe versus Wade. Your elected representatives couldn't do anything on the state level. And likewise, right? We need to protect human beings at every stage of development. Indeed. A child is not... See, this is the essence precedes... Or, sorry, I will say that the existence precedes essence problem of existentialism. The idea that you can give value to the child. Like the child already has an inherent dignity, already has an intrinsic value, right? Inherent dignity, intrinsic value. Despite there being any mind that exists to be able to recognize that truth. See, those on the losing side, those who sought to advance the state's interest, okay, I read that, consistent with the views, the court short-circuited the democratic process by closing it to the large number of Americans who dissented in any respect from Roe. Roe fanned into life an issue that has inflamed our national politics in general and has obscured, with its smoke, the selection of justices to the court in particular ever since. Together, Roe and Casey represent an error that cannot be allowed to stand. I agree. This document is too long for me to give it a reading all the way through. But I think it's important to kind of hear little tidbits from Alito. And I think what we've heard so far is very good. I understand that people are going to be very heated. Who knows, you may see riots. Who knows what we'll see in the coming months. But I think it's going to be very important for each state now. All right, so remember, this just pushes it back to the states so that we, as a people, can persuade one another, vote for our representatives who can craft legislation to go through the House, go through the Senate, and to be signed into law by the governor at each particular state. If for some reason a person doesn't like the state in which they live, they can move. You know, some people say, well, just move to a red state or move to a blue state. You know, if you want to live in really dense, high populated areas with really progressive policies, you can move to New York. And if you prefer, you know, a more conservative, more less dense population that upholds traditional values, like a man and a woman coming together, getting married, having children, growing in holiness, raising your children to be good citizens and good Christians. Neither decision has ended debate over the issue of a constitutional right to obtain an abortion. Indeed, in this case, 26 states expressly ask us to overrule Roe and Casey and to return the issue of abortion to the people and their elected representatives. This court's inability to end debate on the issue should not have been surprising. This court cannot bring about the permanent resolution of a rancorous national controversy simply by dictating a settlement and telling the people to move on, right? Just putting something out there to draw a line isn't going to help. The people need to do this through their state elected representatives and not have a cram down from the top that says this is just going to how it's going to be. This court cannot bring about the permanent resolution. So whatever influence the court may have on public attitudes must stem from the strength of our opinions, not an attempt to exercise raw judicial power. Right? To legislate from the bench in just raw judicial power, this is how it's going to be. Push something that it isn't even grounded in the Constitution and violates our history and tradition. We do not pretend to know how our political system or society will respond to today's decision overruling Roe and Casey. And even if we could foresee what will happen, we would have no authority to let that knowledge influence our decision. You see, the court can't be influenced by people. So people protesting at people's houses, don't do that. You know, when people were outside my governor's home who were more right-wing and conservative, I was like, no, you don't go to the place where a person's babies sleep. You don't do that. You want to go to the courthouse, or you want to go to the state capitol and peacefully protest in ways that aren't disruptive to normal everyday activities, and show common sense concerning all of it. That's fine, but no, do not go to people's houses. What? Solar panels? I'm not talking about that. Oh, okay. Well, apparently you guys know I'm listening to a YouTube video. That's not good. But the court can't be influenced. Like, people who think that if I go to the house of Kavanaugh and I try to do what? What are you going to do? He's not going to change his mind. You're not going to intimidate him. That's illegal. You can't try to use pressure to try to influence the court. The court doesn't rule based on the influence from the masses, or in this case, the most aggressive, the militant activists who want to push a particular idea. The justices simply interpret the Constitution and law as it was put forth. It is by nature conservative. To conserve its original meaning. That's the best jurisprudence. Beyond that is people just trying to legislate from the bench or try to read ideas into the Constitution. No, if there needs to be a new amendment, that has to go through the legislature. That needs to be signed into law by the executive branch. All of this stuff has checks and balances. And even if we could foresee what will happen, we we would have no authority to let that knowledge influence our decision. So even if they think people are going to riot in the street and kill people and all this other stuff, that will not influence their decision, because it's not based on what people will do. It's not based on how upset some people will be. It has to do with, what does the Constitution say? If that right is not there, it's not grounded, then that's just how it is. We can only do our job, which is to interpret the law, apply long-standing principles of stare decisis, and decide this case accordingly. I'm sure Ben Shapiro knows exactly how that's supposed to be pronounced. He's a lawyer. Stare, I think it's stare decisis. Stare decisis, I think. Stare decisis. We therefore hold that the Constitution does not confer a right to abortion. Roe and Casey must be overruled, and the authority to regulate abortion must be returned to the people and to their elected representatives. I'm fine with that. This never should have been a cram down. This never should have been an exercise in raw judicial power. Obviously, as a Roman Catholic, I am pro-life. And life is to be protected. Now, some people were saying that they're going to go after other things now. Maybe. But I think the most ridiculous, like, I would be perfectly happy with marriage being defined precisely as the sacrament of marriage is defined by the theology and canon law of the Roman Catholic Church. I'd be perfectly fine with that. I think that's good for our society. I think that's good for our society. But some of the other things that were mentioned, like states starting to ban interracial marriage, like, where does that come from? It's like, well, there isn't an explicit right in the Constitution for interracial. Like, why is that even a question? You're a human being who's a male marrying a human being that is a female for the procreation of children. That's marriage. Why are you bringing race into that? That's really weird. Why that ought to even be a thing that somebody would even think of. Yeah, I hear it's like with I hear it's quite progressive in Canada. I mean, I hear comments like, a Canadian doesn't have a right to own a gun for self-defense or use a gun for self-defense. That's so foreign to my ears. Or the idea that you can regulate language, right, to enact a law that demands compulsive speech, and if you don't, therefore you will be fined. Yeah, that's the whole Jordan Peterson issue, right? C-16 or something like that. I can never remember. If I don't talk about it enough and I don't quote it enough, it's not going to be in my head. Weapons in general are not allowed for use as a self-defense tools. Yeah, that is so foreign to me. C-16, I actually remembered. Oh, nice. My memory is usually really, really bad unless it's something I'm actively talking about all the time. I'm like the complete opposite of Ben Shapiro. I talk slow and I remember less. That's very interesting to hear, Yoshi. That's very interesting to know. I'm often asked about how or what somebody should pray. And it is quite common for us to our prayer life to become very lopsided, where we are petitioning our Lord to do something on our behalf. It is more common for people to neglect to be thankful for an outcome. I would invite everybody to not only continue to petition the Lord for greater virtue in our society, in our respective countries, but to actually be thankful and thank God and praise Him for influencing and molding hearts. Because it is God who, through various means, to form the conscience and to inform the intellect, that draws men to Himself, that free us to truly live out liberty and to find happiness and holiness to find our meaning, to be directed towards our natural end, and to find that fulfillment for which we were created and for which we exist. Very, very important that we are thankful in this time, because the days grow evil, and while I'm kind of surprised by this, I'm going to be very happy that people will recognize that it is not morally permissible to intend to kill another person at any stage of human development, particularly the innocent. It is difficult at times to watch people do things that don't benefit them, to do things that are not reasonable. We certainly have no right to such things. We actually become less as a result of them. The misuse of the will. To not do what we ought to do, but to do anything we want to do, no matter the consequences. It's even sadder that the consequences are not recognized or understood. And what's worse is that people are prideful and arrogant and stubborn in those positions that ultimately will lead to their own ruin. It will damage relationships. It will cause wounding to the soul. And what's even worse from a spiritual standpoint, these people become the playthings of demons. I think that's the saddest part about it. And they're proud. They're proud in their errors. They're proud in their deceit. And what's worse is that they think it's virtue. And it's always everybody else's fault when there's a negative consequence. Yeah. So... But yeah, I mean, thinking through all the different arguments that somebody could try to raise from the child is going to be impacted by drugs, or the child is going to live in a poor environment, or the child... It's all justification for not allowing a person... There's a lot of human suffering. I think people forget because they haven't lived through it and they may not think about it. But it used to be that you had like 10, 20 children and you would be lucky to have half of them live beyond age 10. Suffering was the crucible through which shaped us, that forced us to strive, to force us to hope. People are too soft. People are too effeminate. People are too weak. People are too coddled. And we avoid suffering at all costs. At all costs, even to our detriment, because they're not willing to accept that suffering is something which we should have an attitude of holy resignation. We should have a holy resignation to the process that suffering brings us through. It develops virtue in ways that things that don't lead to suffering can't do. We need to be stretched. Our culture doesn't do that. Instead, it feeds itself with instant gratification and knows very little of self-denial. I'm sure most people never even fast unless there's some sort of health benefit to them. Some people learn to delay and time out gratification, but it's either indulging in their misguided passions and their wayward desires, or they're not exercising the virtue of temperance. I don't say these things because I've mastered all of this. That's not my point. My point is a reflection upon our culture. And in a society that wants to slaughter children in the name of convenience, I understand that people have been misguided through our culture with bad ideas. They've been influenced and impacted by really, really bad ideas that are contrary to the teachings of the church. And it just leaves people in desolation. You know, people are marrying this person, divorcing, marrying this person, divorcing, marrying that person. Broken homes, absentee fathers. This, of course, is the brokenness of humanity and the sins which we bear that end up impacting lives as they're growing up at the most vulnerable developmental stages of one's life, not only in the womb, but early childhood outside of the womb. Just very, very unfortunate. Okay, I'm going to finish up tonight. We're coming up to the 2-hour mark. I only went 3 hours yesterday because I was being distracted by a certain individual in chat. But tonight, I'm determined. We're going to stop at 2 hours, not go beyond that. Oh, very good. I look forward to reading it. What's today? Friday, I guess? I thought about doing it again and just skipping some of the other stuff. Just focus on the facts. And I've had that thought. Yeah, I'm trying to do more streams. Well, I mean, I kind of want to just have a one and done kind of thing with the last topic. Yeah, I mean, I was actually reflecting upon my reflection of what I wrote 3 years ago, and I was kind of surprised just how much non-Catholic stuff I've been able to weed out of my thinking, and how much I've learned in the last 3 years. The people who attacked me intended for my harm. But what they don't know is that God takes things that people intend for the harm of others, and He uses it for my good. I've learned a lot, yeah, about philosophy, our culture, politics. I've learned all kinds of things. How to structure my life so it's not negatively impacted as much. I've grown tremendously. I've made really good changes in my life. And I will say that I'm actually very grateful for what God was able to do in me as a result of the things that I experienced. It kind of reminds me of when Joseph in the Old Testament was sold into slavery to Egypt. That they intended that harm, but then Joseph became very influential. You know, they meant it for evil, but God meant it for my good. That God can bring about extraordinary things. I have not considered that. I used to have one. Hence, you say another Discord server. I could do it if people are going to use it. I am doing things differently now. It could be purposed differently. I just know I don't want to get wrapped up into theological conversations and that sort. I like the idea of people who frequent here talking with themselves like in chat, but the Discord would be like the chat outside of chat. So people can talk with each other there, maybe share links to things that I could talk about and discuss, videos that we could review together, And maybe there could be more synergy between what we're purposing there. I'll definitely think about it, and maybe in the next few days I could set that up, and I can send a link to I can send a link to people that I see here often enough. Invite them. I'm just remembering now I banned someone tonight. I don't know why Infinite continued to to come in here just to make comments, but anyways, you sometimes do have questions. Yeah, I it's probably a good idea. I could do it and we could see how it goes. About confession. Well, that's cool. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I mean, he did make that comment about confession. Yeah, people who don't understand Catholic theology, that's the thing. It's very nuanced. It's one of the things that actually impresses me about Catholic theology. A lot of Protestant theology, in my opinion, is very narrow. It's very either or, black and white on some things, and sometimes more dogmatic than the Catholic Church is on certain issues. Whereas the Catholic Church is more reflective, both, and makes a lot of distinctions. I mean, I like the fact that, like, if a Protestant uses the term merit, they usually have one thing in mind, but for me, it's like strict merit, condign merit, congruous merit. There's distinctions upon distinctions that can be made, and it's wonderful, you know. Do not like me could pretend to be a scout. Yeah, it's true. But here's the thing, though. People, I can control, I can give, no, but there is a way to control that, Savage. That there is a way that I can give you a link, and it's the only active link. Nobody else would have it. I would just send it in a Twitch message to certain people, and it would be something we all would be agreeable to. It's not going to be an open link, it's going to be a private Discord server that I will have full control over. So I don't know. I don't know. Now that you've used that emote again, which I haven't seen in a long time, which I absolutely love. Yeah, I can even set it for an invite for a single use as well. You can time limit links. It's really cool, actually. So yeah, it's going to be a private server. Yoshi, somebody had commented earlier saying that I confess to God instead of man, or something like that. We could definitely, next stream, I have a few things lined up. I was sharing at the beginning, I wanted to go through this book, The Case for Catholicism, written by Trent. I've been hearing so much about it. Even though it was written 5 years ago, it's probably got some really interesting things for discussions. But yeah, confession could be a topic. I definitely want to... a recent thing happened in the lay Dominican fraternity that I attend. A conflict concerning Luisa Picaretta. I definitely want to do a video on that. Probably read through 2 articles and comment on them. And yeah, I don't have time for preparation. I don't have time for scripts. You know, I'm gonna have to do this very lazily and play videos or read articles and then just talk off the cuff. You know, heck, I didn't even provide much new material here, and we've talked for 2 hours. So yeah, Trent, he has his own YouTube channel, the Council of Trent. Is what he calls his channel, and I listen to all this stuff. He's brilliant. He has to be autistic or something. His ability to remember things is absurd. I'm like the complete opposite of Trent. I can't remember things for the life of me. And even then, I'm surprised at some of the things I do actually remember.